60 miners went down, only 3 returned. Cursed Mines of Kentucky, 1868. A ledger on my desk, 57 dead, paid 2 days after. A note, North Shaft, do not enter. A locked room, journal words, insurance pays. This is how the secret surfaced. When a man sends 60 into a shaft he knows will fail, is that murder or business? Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Subscribe to keep these stories alive and honor the ones who couldn't speak. In the spring of 1868, a ledger arrived at the Marshall County Courthouse in Benton, Kentucky. It came from the Holloway Coal and Iron Company. The numbers were wrong, not by accident, by design. Abigail Trent had been town clerk for 7 years. She knew what a payroll ledger should look like. Neat columns, names in alphabetical order, wages calculated to the penny. This one looked perfect, too perfect. She opened it on the morning of April 12th and ran her finger down the list of names. 60 men, all paid through March 31st, full wages for the week. She stopped. Her hand went still on the page. The mine had collapsed on March 29th. 57 men died. She had filed the death certificates herself, stacked them in a wooden box because the county did not have enough space in the ledger book for that many names at once. 57 funerals in 8 days. The church could not hold them all. They buried them in shifts. But here, in this ledger, all 57 were listed as paid, 2 full days after they died. She checked the date on the submission, April 10th, nearly 2 weeks after the collapse. Someone had sat down with a pen and ink and written out wages for dead men. Someone had signed the document. Someone had delivered it to her desk, as if nothing was wrong. She closed the ledger, stood, walked to the window. Outside, the spring sun was bright on the courthouse steps. A woman in a black dress crossed the square, another widow. Abigail had lost count of how many she had seen. She put on her shawl and walked to the mine office. It sat at the edge of town, a low wooden building with a painted sign that read, Holloway Coal and Iron, established 1863. The door was open. Inside, Clayton Holloway sat at his desk, sorting papers. He looked up when she entered, smiled. "Mr. Holloway," she said, "I have a question about the payroll ledger." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit, Miss Trent. Always a pleasure." She did not sit. The ledger shows wages paid through March 31st. The collapse happened March 29th. He nodded slowly. "That is correct. But the men died on the 29th. He leaned back in his chair. "It is standard practice, Miss Trent, to pay out the full week. The families need the money. I am not a heartless man. You submitted the payroll 12 days after the collapse, after the funerals." He smiled again. "The Lord works in mysterious ways. Paperwork takes time. I wanted to be sure. Every family received what was owed." She placed the ledger on his desk. "You paid men who were already dead. 2 days of wages they never worked." He did not look at the ledger. He looked at her. "Miss Trent, I understand you are new to matters of business, but I assure you everything is in order. If you have concerns, you may take them up with the county board. I am certain they will explain how these things are done." She left without another word. Outside, the air smelled like coal smoke and spring mud. She walked back to the courthouse and climbed the stairs to the records room. It was a narrow space with shelves that reached the ceiling. Dust hung in the air like fog. She found the drawer marked Mine Inspections and pulled it open. The file for January 1868 was missing. She checked February. It was there. December of 67, also there. But January was gone. She ran her hand along the bottom of the drawer. The wood was clean in one spot. No dust. Something had been removed recently. She knelt and looked behind the drawer. Wedged in the gap between the wood and the wall was a folded piece of paper. She pulled it free, unfolded it. The handwriting was rushed, uneven. North Shaft. "Do not enter?" It was signed W.B. January 14. She sat on the floor and read it 3 times. Then she folded it and put it in her pocket. That evening she visited the Moss family. They lived on a small farm 2 miles outside town. The house was dark. She knocked. Samuel Moss opened the door. He was 19, thin, His hands were bandaged. He stared at her and said nothing. "Mr. Moss, I need to ask about the collapse." He started to close the door. She put her hand on the frame. "Please." His mother appeared behind him. "Let her in, Samuel." They sat at the kitchen table. Hiram Moss, Samuel's uncle, stood by the stove. He was 44, broad shoulders, a face carved from hard years underground. He did not look at Abigail. "What happened that morning?" she asked. Samuel looked at his uncle. Hiram said nothing. "You were in the south tunnel when it collapsed," she said. "All three of you. Samuel, Hiram, and Josiah Kern. You survived because you were not in the north shaft." Samuel's hands shook. "We do not talk about it." "Why not?" Hiram turned. His voice was low. "Because talking will not bring them back, but it might tell us why they died." Hiram's jaw tightened. "They died because the mountain took them. That is all." She pulled the note from her pocket and placed it on the table. "North shaft. Do not enter. Someone knew. Someone warned against it, and 60 men went down anyway." Hiram stared at the note. Samuel looked away. His mother stood and walked to the window. Abigail leaned forward. 57 men are dead. Their families deserve to know if it could have been stopped." Hiram's voice cracked. "You think we do not know that. You think we do not see their faces every time we close our eyes." "We were there, Miss Trent. We crawled through the dark while they screamed. We made it out. They did not. And now you want us to talk. I want the truth." "The truth," he said, "will not feed my daughters. It will not keep this roof over our heads. Clayton Holloway owns half this county. You go after him, you will lose. And we will starve." She stood. "I am going after him anyway." She walked out into the night. The sky was clear, stars thick as salt. She thought about her father, the railroad auditor who died because a supervisor covered up faulty brakes. The company buried the evidence. No one faced justice. Her father was just a name on a list. She would not let that happen again. Back at the courthouse, she locked the door to her office, lit a lamp, pulled the land survey records from 1863, found the original mine map filed by the previous owner. The north shaft was marked in red ink, abandoned, water table breach, unstable. Clayton Holloway sent 60 men into that mountain. 57 did not come back, and someone had known it would happen. The mine entrance stood like a wound in the hillside. Abigail arrived at dawn, when the mist still clung to the valley and the air tasted like stone and ash. The opening was sealed with fresh timber and tar. A wooden cross had been planted in the dirt. Wilted flowers lay scattered at its base. She counted them. 57 bouquets, one for each man. The foreman's shack sat 30 yards down slope. Smoke rose from the chimney. She knocked. Dale Pritchard opened the door. He was 50, gray beard, eyes that would not hold still. He looked past her shoulder as if expecting someone else. "Mr. Pritchard," she said, "I need to ask about the collapse." He stepped outside and closed the door behind him, kept his voice low. "Nothing to tell that has not already been said. Why did the north shaft fail? Old timber. Happens sometimes." She waited. He shifted his weight. "Flooding," he added. "Water gets in, weakens the support." "Were you there that morning?" He looked at the ground. "No, I was not." "Where were you?" He wiped his hands on his trousers. "I was at the office. Mr. Holloway needed me to check supply orders." "You were not at the mine when 60 men went underground." His jaw tightened. "I was doing my job." She left him standing there and walked back to town. At the courthouse, she pulled the land surveys from 1865, found the Holloway mine map. The north shaft was drawn in clean ink, new construction, rated safe for 20 years. She laid it flat on her desk and stared at it. Then she pulled the earlier survey, 1863, filed by the previous owner before Holloway bought the land. The same shaft was marked in red, abandoned, water table breach, unstable. She placed the two maps side by side. Same location, same tunnel, two different stories. One said safe, one said death trap. Holloway had redrawn the map and submitted it as new construction. He had erased the warning. She went to the business filings, found Holloway's records from February. A single document stood out: insurance policy, mining equipment, and operational losses. $12,000. The premium was listed at the bottom, $800. He had mortgaged his house to pay it. She read the date, February 9th, 1868. 6 weeks before the collapse. Her hands went cold. She found Samuel Moss at his mother's farm. He was chopping wood in the yard. When he saw her coming, he set the axe down and wiped his face. Did not speak. "I need to know what happened that morning," she said. He shook his head. "I already told you. We do not talk about it. Samuel, 57 men are dead. If Mr. Holloway knew that shaft was dangerous, then this was not an accident." He looked at her. His eyes were red. "You think we do not know that? Then tell me." He sat on the chopping block, put his head in his hands. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Mr. Holloway came down that morning, early. Before the shift started, he told us the south tunnel was full, said we had to work north or lose the day's pay. My uncle said it smelled like bad air, said the timbers looked soft. Mr. Holloway called us cowards, said the engineer had cleared it, said if we did not want to work, he would find men who did. Did you see the engineer's report?" Samuel shook his head. "My uncle asked for it. Mr. Holloway said, 'Are you calling me a liar, boy?' My uncle said, 'No, sir,' and we went down." She waited. Samuel wiped his eyes. "We heard cracking around noon. Not loud, just a sound in the stone. My uncle told the men to run. Some did. Most stayed. They were afraid of losing their pay. The ceiling came down fast, like a wave. My uncle pulled me and Josiah toward the south tunnel. We crawled through a gap. 57 men stayed behind. How long did it take?" He looked up. For what? For them to stop screaming. He did not answer. She walked back to town and went straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Thomas Braddock sat behind his desk, cleaning his pipe. He was 60, heavy. A man who had held his position for 20 years by knowing when to look and when to look away. She placed the maps on his desk, then the insurance document, then Samuel's testimony, written out in her own hand. "Mr. Holloway sent 60 men into a shaft he knew was unstable," she said. "He took out a massive insurance policy 6 weeks before it collapsed. He ignored warnings. He threatened the men into going down. This was not an accident." Braddock studied the papers, took his time. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "Do you have proof he knew the shaft was dangerous?" She pointed to the maps. "The original survey marked it abandoned. Maps can be wrong." She pointed to the insurance filing. He mortgaged his house to pay the premium. 6 weeks later, 57 men died, and he filed a claim. Braddock set down his pipe. "That is just good business, Miss Trent. A man protects his investments. This is murder." He stood, slowly. His voice was calm, cold. "Clayton Holloway employs half this county. His payroll feeds 100 families. You keep digging, and you will be digging alone. No one will thank you. No one will help you. And when you are done, you will have nothing but enemies." She gathered the papers. "I already have nothing." She left his office and stood in the square. The sun was setting. Shadows stretched long across the stones. A woman in black crossed the street. Another widow. Abigail watched her disappear into the evening. The law would not act. But the dead had left their own record, and Abigail Trent was not finished reading. Abigail visited the Holloway home on a Thursday morning under the pretense of delivering tax documents. The house sat on a hill overlooking the town. White paint, black shutters, a garden that had gone to seed. She knocked, waited. The door opened slowly. Mrs. Holloway stood in the doorway. She was thin, gray hair pulled back, tight. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. "Thank you, Miss Trent. You did not need to come all this way." Abigail smiled. It was no trouble. "How are you keeping, Mrs. Holloway?" The woman glanced back into the house. "As well as can be expected. These have been difficult months. I cannot imagine. May I come in for a moment? It is a long walk back to town." Mrs. Holloway hesitated, then stepped aside. They sat in the parlor. The room was cold, no fire in the hearth. The furniture looked expensive but worn. Mrs. Holloway folded her hands in her lap and stared at them. "Your husband must be very busy," Abigail said. "He is always busy. The mind requires constant attention, even now, even after the collapse. Mrs. Holloway's face tightened, especially after. He keeps a study upstairs, works late into the night. I have not been inside since January. He keeps it locked. Abigail nodded, stood. Thank you for the rest, Mrs. Holloway. I should be going. She left the house and walked down the hill. That Sunday she waited until the church bells rang, watched from across the street as Clayton and Mrs. Holloway climbed into their carriage and rode toward town. Then she walked back up the hill. The front door was locked. She tried the windows. The third one slid open. She climbed through, stood in the hallway, listened. The house was silent. The study door was upstairs at the end of the hall. She tried the handle. Locked. She pulled a letter opener from her pocket and worked it into the gap. The lock was old, simple. It clicked open. Inside, the room smelled like tobacco and ink. A desk sat beneath the window, papers stacked neatly, a lamp, a small iron safe in the corner. She moved to the desk and began searching. The first letter was dated January 20th, 1868. The handwriting was precise, professional. Mr. Holloway, I have completed my review of the Northern expansion plans. I cannot in good conscience approve the work. The 1863 breach remains unresolved. The water table is unstable. Any load-bearing work risks catastrophic failure. I must recommend you abandon this section entirely. It was signed by an engineer in Lexington, name and credentials listed at the bottom. She set it aside and found the second letter. Dated February 3rd, Holloway's reply. Your services are no longer required. Beneath it, a receipt. $80 paid to a man named Virgil Cass. The notation read secondary consultation, northern shaft clearance. No engineering credentials. No company name. Just a signature. She kept searching, found a journal, leather-bound. The pages were filled with Holloway's handwriting. She turned to March. The 15th entry made her stop breathing. Cass says the shaft will hold if we stay shallow. I cannot afford another month of losses. The men will work north. She flipped forward. March 28th. The night before the collapse. Heard cracking in the dark. Told Pritchard to send them deeper. If it holds one more day, the insurance pays. Her hand shook. She read it again. If it holds one more day. He knew. He heard the mountain breaking, and he sent them deeper. She pulled out her notebook and began copying the pages by hand. Her pen scratched across the paper. Outside, a bird called. She kept writing. Copied the engineer's letter word for word. Copied the receipt. Copied the journal entries, every line, every date. Footsteps on the stairs. She froze, looked at the door. The footsteps grew louder, closer. She shoved the journal back into the desk, grabbed her notebook. The doorknob turned. She ran to the window, pushed it open, climbed out onto the narrow ledge. Below her, the ground was 20 feet down. A trellis ran along the side of the house. She reached for it. Her fingers found the wood. It creaked under her weight. The study door opened. She climbed down, fast. The trellis bent, cracked. She dropped the last 6 feet and hit the ground hard. Pain shot through her ankle. She did not stop. She ran across the yard and into the trees. Behind her she heard a shout. She kept running. Her ankles screamed. She stumbled, caught herself, kept moving. The trees thickened. She looked back. No one followed. She stopped, leaned against a tree. Her chest heaved. She opened her notebook. The pages were still there. Every word copied, every line of evidence. She had the proof. But would anyone believe a clerk over a mine owner? She walked back to town slowly, stayed off the main road. Her ankle throbbed with every step. By the time she reached her small house behind the courthouse, the sun was setting. She locked the door, drew the curtains, lit a lamp. She spread the copied pages across her table, read them again, the engineer's warning, Holloway's dismissal, the journal entry from March 28th. Heard cracking, told Pritchard to send them deeper. If it holds one more day, the insurance pays. He had gambled 57 lives for $12,000, and he had lost. But the men paid the price. She sat in the dark and thought about her father, the railroad auditor who found the faulty brakes, the supervisor who buried the report, the company that closed ranks. Her father died, and no one faced justice. The record was sealed. The truth was erased. Not this time. Clayton Holloway had built his wealth on a mountain. Now that mountain had a voice, and it was screaming. Winter came early that year. By November, frost covered the courthouse steps each morning, and the sky hung low and gray over Benton. Abigail heard the news from Mrs. Moss. Hiram was dying, lung fever from the dust. She walked to the farm through cold that bit at her face and hands. The house was dark, warm inside but dark. Hiram lay in bed near the fire. His breathing was shallow, wet. His wife sat beside him with a cloth. She looked up when Abigail entered, but said not speak. Abigail pulled a chair close to the bed. Hiram's eyes were closed. His skin was gray. She could see his chest rise and fall, each breath a struggle. "Mrs. Moss," she said quietly, "may I speak with him?" The woman nodded. "He will not answer. He has not spoken in 3 days, will not eat, will not drink. He is letting go." Abigail reached into her coat and pulled out her notebook. She opened it to the page where she had copied Holloway's journal entry from March 28th. She began to read aloud, heard cracking in the dark, told Pritchard to send them deeper. "If it holds one more day, the insurance pays." Hiram's eyes opened. She leaned closer. He knew Mr. Moss. "Clayton Holloway heard the mountain breaking, and he sent you deeper anyway. He gambled your lives for an insurance claim." Hiram's hand moved, reached toward her. She took it. His grip was weak but steady. "Tell me what happened," she said. His voice was a rasp, barely a whisper. The north shaft was damp. The timbers were soft. We could hear water behind the rock. "Mr. Holloway came down himself that morning, told us to keep working. Said the engineer had cleared it. Samuel asked to see the paperwork. Mr. Holloway looked at him and said, 'Are you calling me a liar, boy?' What did Samuel do?" Hiram closed his eyes. "He said no, sir, and we went back to work." "When did you know it would collapse?" "At noon. The cracking started, not loud, just a whisper in the stone. I told the men to run. Some did. Most did not. They feared losing their pay more than the rock. They had families, mouths to feed. They stayed." Hiram's breathing grew harder. His wife stood and moved toward the bed. Abigail held up a hand. "Please." "The ceiling came down in a wave," Hiram said. "Darkness, dust, screaming. I pulled Samuel toward the south tunnel, grabbed Josiah. We crawled through a gap in the rubble. 57 men stayed behind. I heard them calling for help, calling for God, calling for their mothers. Then I heard nothing." Abigail waited. Hiram opened his eyes again. "After the rescue, Mr. Holloway visited us in the medical tent. He said if we spoke about warnings or bad air, he would see us charged with cowardice and negligence. Said we caused the collapse by working too fast. Said no one would hire us again. Our families would starve." I believed him. So I stayed silent. "Why are you telling me now?" "Because I am dying, and I will not die a coward." He reached beneath his pillow, pulled out a folded piece of paper. His hand shook as he gave it to her. "I kept this hidden in my boot since March. Did not know what to do with it. Thought maybe it would go to the grave with me. But you are here, so take it." She unfolded the paper. It was a note. The handwriting was rushed, uneven. "Mr. Holloway, I hear water. Please pull the men." It was dated March 29th, 6 in the morning. Signed by Dale Pritchard, the foreman. She turned it over. On the back, in different handwriting, were 2 words. "One more load." Holloway's handwriting. She looked at Hiram. His eyes were wet. "He knows what he did," Hiram said. "And now you do, too." Hiram Moss died 3 days later. The funeral was small. His wife, his daughters, Samuel, Josiah Kern standing at the back. Abigail watched them lower the coffin into the frozen ground and thought about 57 other graves, 57 other families. All told it was an accident. All told the mountain just took them. But the mountain did not take them. A man did. She went to the circuit judge in Paducah, carried her notebook, the copied letters, the journal entries, Hiram's testimony written out by hand, the foreman's note with Holloway's reply on the back. The judge was an old man, white beard, tired eyes. He read every page, took his time. When he finished, he set the papers down and looked at her. "This is compelling, Miss Trent. Very compelling. But Mr. Holloway will say the journal was forged. He will say the note is hearsay. Hiram Moss is dead and cannot testify in court. Without a living witness, this case will not hold. He has 3 living witnesses: Samuel Moss, Josiah Kern, Dale Pritchard. The judge shook his head. Pritchard works for Holloway. He will not testify against him. The other 2 are minors. Holloway's lawyers will tear them apart. They will say the men are angry, bitter, looking for someone to blame. A jury will not convict a mine owner on the word of 2 survivors who cannot prove what they heard or saw. So he walks free. The judge folded his hands. I am sorry. There is not enough here to bring charges. She gathered her papers and left, walked out into the cold, stood on the courthouse steps, and watched the river below, gray water moving slow between the trees. She had the truth. She had the evidence, and it was not enough. She returned to Benton and began packing her desk. She would leave, go somewhere new, start again. Forget this place and the 57 men buried in its soil. A knock at the door. She looked up. Josiah Kern stood in the doorway. He held a leather pouch. He had not spoken to her since the collapse, had not spoken to anyone, but now he stepped inside and placed the pouch on her desk. She opened it. Inside were 57 small stones, each one carved with initials, carefully, precisely. She looked at him. Samuel and I made them, he said, one for each man who died. We have been carving them for 8 months, so they would not be forgotten. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded map. This is the mine, drawn from memory. It shows exactly where the collapse started. The spot matches the 1863 breach line. Exactly. She stared at the stones, at the map, at Josiah. Why now? She asked. Because Hiram is dead, and because silence is the same as lying. I will not lie any more. The county could no longer pretend it had not heard. Abigail returned to Paducah with the stones and the map, went back to the circuit judge, laid them on his desk alongside all the other evidence. He studied the map, picked up one of the stones, turned it in his fingers, read the initials carved into the surface. This is remarkable work, he said. But it does not change the facts. Holloway's lawyers will argue the map is conjecture. The stones are memorial, not evidence. Without testimony from someone who can prove Holloway knew the shaft would fail, I cannot bring charges. She left without arguing, walked to the offices of the Paducah Gazette. The editor was a man named Thomas Webb. He was 40, ink-stained fingers, a desk buried in paper. He looked up when she entered. I have a story, she said. He gestured to a chair. Everyone has a story, not like this one. She placed the evidence in front of him. The engineer's letter warning Holloway the shaft was unstable. Holloway's dismissal of the engineer. The receipt showing he hired an unqualified man to approve the work. The insurance policy taken out 6 weeks before the collapse. The journal entry from the night before. Heard cracking. Told Pritchard to send them deeper. If it holds one more day, the insurance pays. The foreman's note begging Holloway to pull the men. Holloway's reply, one more load. Hiram's deathbed testimony. The map drawn by Josiah Kern showing the collapse started exactly where the 1863 survey said it would. The 57 stones. Webb read every page. Took over an hour. When he finished, he sat back in his chair and was silent for a long time. If I print this, he said, Holloway will sue. He will say it is libel. He will try to destroy this paper. Then let him try. You understand what you are asking. I understand that 57 men are dead, and that the man who killed them is walking free. Webb looked at the evidence again. Then he nodded. I will print it. The story ran on December 4th, 1868. The headline read, Holloway Mine Disaster. Evidence suggests owner knew shaft was unsafe. The article was 3 full columns. It included the engineer's warning, the insurance filing, the timeline, Hiram's deathbed account, the foreman's note, with Holloway's handwriting on the back. It reprinted the journal entry in full. It described the map and the stones. It named every one of the 57 dead. By Christmas, the story had reached Louisville, then Cincinnati. Then papers as far as Philadelphia and New York picked it up. Letters arrived at the Gazette offices. Dozens, then hundreds. Miners writing from Pennsylvania and West Virginia and Ohio saying they had seen the same pattern. Owners cutting costs, ignoring warnings, sending men into shafts that should have been sealed. The Holloway case became a symbol, proof that it was happening everywhere. Clayton Holloway's insurance claim was denied on December 20th. The insurance company cited evidence of gross negligence and possible fraud. His investors pulled out. By January, he could not meet payroll. The mine closed. By March of 1869, he was bankrupt. The county seized his house to cover debts. He moved to a boarding house in Paducah, a single room above a tavern. Abigail saw him once, walking along the docks, looking for work. His clothes were worn, his face unshaven. He looked older, smaller. Men turned away when he approached. No one would hire him. He disappeared from public records in 1871. Some said he drank himself to death in a room with no heat and no visitors. Others said he bought a horse and rode west and was never heard from again. No one knew. No one cared. He had become what he made those 57 men. A name with no story. A grave with no marker. In 1870, the state of Kentucky passed new mine safety laws. Every shaft required approval from an independent engineer. Safety provisions had to be posted. Workers could refuse dangerous assignments without losing pay. The law was called the Holloway Act. Not to honor him, to remember what he did. Abigail Trent was appointed deputy clerk of Marshall County, the youngest woman to hold the position. She served for 32 years, never married, never left Benton. She kept the 57 stones in a wooden box on her desk, showed them to anyone who asked. In 1873, the county erected a memorial at the courthouse, a stone marker, 10 feet tall, carved with 57 names. Beneath them, a single line. They were sent into darkness. The truth brought them into light. The Holloway mine was never reopened. The entrance remains sealed to this day, timber and tar and a cross that has weathered but not fallen. On cold November mornings when the fog rolls through the hills, people say you can still hear the mountain breathing. Not a curse, a reminder that the earth remembers what men try to forget. 57 men went into the dark because one man valued money over life. A town stayed silent because power demands silence. But one woman refused to look away. She built a case from scraps of paper and dying words and stones carved by hands that would not let the dead be forgotten. Justice came slow. Justice came hard. But it came. And in the end, the predator became the prey. The man who sent others into the ground found no ground that would hold him. He died alone, unmourned, erased by the same silence he once commanded. The 57 are still remembered, their names carved in granite, their story told and retold. A warning, a witness, a promise that truth, no matter how long buried, will find its way back to the surface. Was Clayton Holloway a murderer or just a desperate man? The law never answered. But history did, and the answer is carved in stone.